backups. We don't need no stinking backups and other racist tidbits from the past. But we won't do that. So I told you I was going to shred somebody because of the ransomware. So the ransomware was shredding your files. So I used the name Donnie, which I later realized was probably not a good idea because then people were like going, oh, you know, there's pro and con people about the Donnie we all know. I have no political Donnies. I have Donnie Wahlberg when he was dressed like I don't. So we have a really that's the serious shredder that yeah, like small animals fall in there and all kinds of things. There's no telling. The next one I have Donnie Osmond and what he wrote on the picture is please meet me soon, love Donnie. And it's like, yeah, so if that didn't make you barf, I'll tell you. So Donnie Osmond is gone. So, and then I don't like this. I don't know the guy personally, but I don't like his character. From the show Happy Days long ago, it's Donnie Most. So there's my Donnies that are all going that way. You have to go face first, Donnie. Sorry. It's maximum pain. Today we're going to continue talking about backups, RAID, and other matters that will affect your files. So stay tuned.
This is a Security Weekly production.
Welcome to Secure Digital Life. And you type in AAA porn or whatever it is you're typing in. So I'm sorry, I was at a PG show.
And I'm really excited to be here.
I'm glad you're here because somebody needs to know what's going on.
That's right.
Okay, so
now somebody has to drink this.
It's another day. It's another episode.
Yeah, he's looking at the wrong camera.
Oh, you put my camera over here. Cut. Basically, forget you ever saw that. I think actually forgetting you ever saw that would really be a good idea at this point. You have backups, right? We talked about this last time. I know, but you didn't listen, did you? You still don't have backups. Russ is with us today from the magic land of whatever that is. It's his office, so like only Russ could have an office that cool.
Hey guys, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for joining us, Russ. It's really nice to have you.
I heard a little birdie said that it's our 53rd episode. Does that mean that it's one more than our year anniversary?
I think so, and I was trying to think of any significance to the number 53, except that it's a prime number. So it's a prime number. It's not a Fibonacci number, and in binary it would be 001. Who cares? But it's probably not significant anyway. We could convert it to hex or something and see if it was something relevant there. But yeah, it's a 53rd episode of SDL, so we've been here like a year. So we all get older and more overweight or whatever. Well, not me, of course, but that's the magic of television. They keep stripping those pounds off. Yep. Today we're talking about backups again, and we're going to do this one and one more about backups because it's such an important topic. And I'm going to start to talk today a little bit about cloud backup, and we're going to talk about RAID because we have to have this conversation. RAID. And that's an old commercial now. You're dating yourself. There used to be two brands of insecticide that everybody used, Raid and Black Flag, and there were little slap fights about it in the laundry room. Like, I use Raid, I use Black Flag. Kills bugs, dead. But I want to start talking about cloud backups because cloud backups are something that is heavily marketed today. And there's many brands of cloud backups that are out there that you can buy. Whether they're, good or not, I don't think they're good or not good, really. They're just there. They do what they're supposed to do, and you have to understand exactly what's being done. So don't let the marketing fool you that you're really backed up, because we have to talk a little bit about why that might not be true. Russ, any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, it really depends on most people who are doing backups out of the box aren't sure of or don't know 100% that everything that they have is covered. So, like for instance, on a Windows-based machine, Microsoft Outlook, while might be confusing if you're backing up your documents, you might think you got everything, but sometimes not. So you have to go to like see local settings, Microsoft Office, Outlook, and back up your DAT file or whatever OS X or whatever file it might be. I don't remember specifically. Oh, PSC. That's what it was, PST. But the average consumer is not going to know that. They're going to click on, oh, I want my photos, my pictures, and my documents, and they're going to think they're all set. So we'll be talking about that, throughout the show.
Yeah, and I think one of the pieces of that, again, is about your backup planning strategy, because that's where all this stuff fails, is everybody wants to just be able to push a button and say, we're good to go. And unfortunately, that's just not the reality of it, because you have to be able to understand what you're backing up and what it takes to restore that. And that's where it really falls apart for me, for like my corporate people, is they always think, well, it's backed up. But the real problem is, can you restore it? How do you get back to where you have to be? And we talked about that in the last show. So if you didn't watch the last show, you can go check that out. But you really got to figure out, how do I get back to square one so I can start over? And start thinking about that. Make a list. Do I buy a new computer? I've had people say that, like, my laptop got stolen. It's like, okay, first you need another computer. And they're like, oh, well, that's a lot of money. And it's like, okay, so do you have insurance, all that kind of stuff? So my first question about cloud backup, though, was, what is your data safe? So this was sort of the crux of this cloud backup stuff, was, is your data safe in the cloud? And and to me, then it falls into confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So this is the CIA triad they talk about in CISSP training and all that kind of stuff. But it's really true. So one, I guess I'll do availability first. Do you think the drives are safe?
Do I think the physical drives are safe?
Yeah.
I think that would be the case, but that's something you need to find out based on what kind of service is being offered, things of that nature. So
well, and remember, so if it's in availability, there's two pieces to that too. There's one, do you believe that Carbonite, and I'll just pick one out of the air, do you believe that Carbonite is storing your data on a physically secure box? Now, I do. I mean, I don't have any reason to doubt that those drives are physically safe. And we'll talk about some of the ways that hardware is backed up. But the availability also includes, can you get that data? So do you have access to it? So if you really need it and you have a power outage, can you actually get to the drive because your internet's down? Well, that may be a big deal to you, because you say, well, I went and got I got hardware. I desperately need the data. How do I get it? So that was one of my first sort of questions that people ask me. I got all these questions from stuff people have asked me about it. The second one is about is how secure is my data on those drives? So now this one's a little more nebulous. Do you think?
Oh yeah, I think it is, because it's not about physical access of a device anymore. Now it's about data, and there are multiple ways to interact with that data over the internet through cloud, and so you want to make sure that data itself is secure. Like, for instance, encryption. If I want to encrypt my backup on my Mac, I can do that through iCloud. But in the case of, let's say, a user who you and I both know and love, she accidentally encrypted her backup but forgot what the password was. So guess what? Done.
Absolutely. And on this question about how safe is your data on those drives, I'm much more skeptical, because, well, not safe, secure. This is not about the drives failing now. Right. This is about who has access to it. So could someone get to your data on a drive on a commercial cloud? And my opinion is yes, they could, because there's somewhere, I don't know where it is, wherever your provider is located, there's a drive. It's a physical thing. And that physical drive, which is out there and I don't know where, it could be in New Jersey or it could be in India, or it may be shared across both places, somebody has root access to those systems. Somewhere there's an admin person, or maybe a whole bunch, that have access. And I don't know, because that person will be able to get to your data without a doubt. They can open the drive. And, supposedly they're trustworthy and all that kind of stuff, but I don't know. I mean, I don't even know who the person is or how much access they have. Now, Russ said the right thing. Tell them about encrypting your data, Russ.
Yeah, I mean, encryption is one way to go, and depending on the quality of encryption, that will be a solution. That might be a solution for you to ensure that your data is safe and secure, even if somebody does access it. So, if it's 128-bit, AES or something like that, that might be good. Or if there's a 256, that would be even better. But the problem with encryption is if you lose the key, you're screwed.
Right.
And this has happened to a couple of people that I know, actually.
Yep.
And it's a very sad thing.
Uh-huh. And I mean, and here's the thing. So if you do encrypt it, you've taken a step beyond just dumping your raw data on a cloud drive. And I mean, I do. We all do it. Don't worry. I'm not sitting here saying it. I have everything locked down. But you need to figure out how much of your data you really feel is confidential and how confidential you want it to remain. And even if it's encrypted, remember, if you put it somewhere else, somebody has access to it. There is an administrator who has root privilege on that system, and they can get to your data. And you say, oh, I encrypted it with a password. Okay, but they have your data. They can work on cracking that encryption forever because they can make a copy of it and move it off. So think about your data and how safe and confidential you need it to remain. So if you're putting stuff that's very, very, controversial or very, very dangerous up on cloud drives, remember, somebody does have access to it, and so you may want to look very carefully. And the last one on that one is what Russ said, and that's back to availability. If you lose that encryption key, don't be calling Carbonite and saying, I encrypted my backups, and now they're encrypted and I lost the key, because they're going to tell you what I'll tell you, which is good luck. Because I can't get your data back either, and I've had several of those phone calls as well. Like, all my family photos, I moved them, and I encrypted the whole thing on my hard drive. My hard drive failed. I don't know what the key is. Is there any way to recover it? And it's like, good luck, enjoy trying to recover that data.
One of the suggestions that I've heard, Doug, is if you want, like, for instance, Microsoft's BitLocker, that's one of the drive encryption software.
Yep.
You can offload that key onto a USB drive and then lock that USB drive in a vault somewhere. Right. In a safety deposit box or something along those lines.
You don't even have to put it in a safety deposit box, really. I mean, you can put it in a desk drawer and lock it. I mean, this is all about levels of security. So how paranoid are you, and how is it national security secrets? Okay, yeah, you may want to put that in a vault somewhere. On the other hand, if it's just pictures of your grandma, well, you want to keep those pictures. So I don't have any real problem with putting that encryption key in my desk drawer and lock it. Now, you may want to put it off site because your house burns or whatever and you lose it. Okay, so now you got, but that's what I'm saying. You need to think about that whole strategy and not just say, oh, I pushed a button and everything's backed up. The third question was on cloud drives. Can malware attack the cloud drives from my machine? And when I say that, I'm like, okay, yeah, I think so. Russ, you got any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, we actually had that happen here at work. And granted, it wasn't a client server type of thing. It was more of a shared folder, but it was a network share. And somebody put a flash drive in that a student left behind, or a supposed student left behind, and they were trying to find the name of the student so they could return the flash drive. So, great in theory, and then all of a sudden, boop, there it goes. The drive was infected, and then it infected everything, including the shared drive. Everything was crypto locked, and that was that. So
I agree. I've certainly seen that. I did some experiments with it, and there's certainly no reason, and it's not to blame anyone, but there's no reason to say that Microsoft prevents malware, because I don't know how they could do that. If you have malware on your local drive, your OneDrive is on your local drive, and the malware encrypts or corrupts the things in your OneDrive folder, those things will just be copied up as backups, and they will end up being gone. So can malware move over to the cloud? You bet it can. And that's, again, we've talked about that before. My last item, which we were sort of reiterating what we talked about last time, was about out of band. So remember, out of band is you've got to have another set of backups. You can't just say, I put everything on OneDrive, I put everything on Carbonite, I put everything on iDrive, I put everything wherever. You have to have some way to say this is sort of, then that may be what you want to put in the safety deposit box, to be honest with you, because that stuff there is that out of band. I do mine on a server that's not connected to my system, so I can just log in, move everything, and then log off, and there's no way the malware would even know that existed. Again, unless it was incredibly sophisticated, but I'm not that worried about it. Any other thoughts about that, Russ?
No, I think that's fantastic. Just as sort of tongue-in-cheek kind of, if one of our viewers wants to invent a device that's like a sort of prophylactic for a USB drive to prevent the spread of disease, that would be fantastic.
Yummy. Make sure it's flavored. Okay. Oh, here comes the FCC now. They're beating on the door. So the next part of this was to talk about RAID a little bit. And one of the most common things I see on the internet, I see people asking questions on forums about isn't RAID a backup for my data? And I wanted to talk about RAID a little so you would understand it as well. RAID is not a backup for data. RAID is a backup for hardware. And that's a very critical distinction that you need to understand, because RAID is a way to manage drives. It's not a way to back up your data. And if you think it is, you're going to be really, really, really sorry one day, because RAID will not save you from malware. If your material gets infected, RAID will be happy to store it all for you, and it'll store it very safely, but that will not get you the encryption key. That will not get you through the malware to get your data back. So the RAID, and even JBOD, which stands for just a bunch of disks, are two different ways of taking groups of hard drives, putting them together somehow so that your hardware is more resilient to failure. I mean, that's what this is all about, because you've probably heard or known somebody who had a hard drive failure. Mm-hmm. RAID is a way to do that sometimes. It also can make the risk of failure worse. So I want to talk a little bit about RAID levels then to tell you about these different things. The one that makes everything worse, and I know some of you will be going, oh, Doug, no, don't say this, RAID 0. RAID 0 makes everything worse except performance. That's all it is there for. RAID 0 actually increases your likelihood of a hard drive failure, because now your data is spread across two physical devices. It's called striping. So we stripe some data on drive 1 and we stripe some data on drive 2. Both those drives now contain pieces of your data. The reason we do this is to speed things up, because now we've got two caches and we've got two drives, and we're increasing the performance of the drives by striping them. If one drive fails, all drives fail. Mm-hmm. And RAID 0 will bring your world to a screeching halt. And I've been frustrated forever because they started putting it on motherboards, because marketing people went, ooh, RAID, you need that. RAID, you must have it. RAID, you must have it. RAID, RAID, RAID. And all of a sudden, I was getting calls from people going, do I need RAID 0? My motherboard comes with RAID 0. Should I set RAID 0 up? And I'm like, why do you need RAID 0? Like, it's a backup, right? And you're just like, okay, what I'd like you to do is put the phone down, please. Keep listening. Put it on speaker. Now, I would like you to pick up a ball-peen hammer, and I would like you to pick one finger, maybe not the one you value the most, and hit that finger very hard. That horrible injury will remind you for the rest of your life not to use RAID 0 unless you need it for a very specialized purpose. And RAID 0 is great at what it does, but it is not for backing things up. And in fact, it makes your life worse.
It's like, Doug, it's like imaging. You're not going to image, your hard drive to another hard drive for backup protocol. That's all it does is clone the disk in case of disk failure, so that you have no loss of productivity, loss of time or downtime.
Yeah, and so you're talking about RAID 1. So yeah. RAID 1 is mirroring, and RAID 1 is another performance enhancer that is very useful for what it is. And what RAID 1 does, it takes two drives, and now it keeps them current. So they're both duplicates of the other. And yeah, that kind of hard drive failure backup in a sense, because if drive 1 fails, drive 2 theoretically is still mirrored. I will tell you that doesn't always work, and that recovering RAID 1 failures like that, because that's not what it was meant for, is not necessarily a backup. It's not even necessarily a hardware backup, and it can actually be corrupted, because if the hard drive starts failing and it starts corrupting your data on drive 0, drive 1 may actually copy that corruption right over as a part of that RAID mirroring process, and the next thing you know, all your data is fried. So neither RAID 0 nor 1, which is the two they put on motherboards all the time, it just kills me. I'm like, why did you do this? And it's like marketing. RAID 0, RAID 1, you must have it. You must have it. You must have twice it. But there is a cure for that, and it's called RAID 1.0, not RAID 10. It's called RAID 1.0. RAID 1.0 is a combination of the two. So take striping, and then the performance increases you get out of striping the drives. Take mirroring, put that on top of it. So now you have to have 4 drives. So you've got two sets of 2, and each 2 set is mirrored, and then you stripe across a set of drives. Or you can, I think, I think that's how it works. I've never actually run RAID 1.0, but something like that. But the idea would be you get the performance enhancement, plus you get some hardware security from it. I just have this thing about RAID 0 and RAID 1 and RAID 1.0, but some people really like RAID 1.0, but you need 4 drives now. So now you need 4 1-terabyte drives, and they're all going to be shared and all this kind of shared space. Have you ever used 1.0, right, Russ?
No, the only time I've used RAID is with RAID 5 for a high-performing gaming rig.
Okay, well, so RAID 5, and a lot of gamers use RAID 0 too, I'll tell you, because RAID 0 allows you to stripe all that stuff and you get a lot of performance enhancement. RAID 5 is where you start getting into the true hardware resilience model. RAID 5, you have to have 3 hard drives at least. And what happens is we stripe data across all 3 drives now. So each drive is getting a piece of the data. But what happens is there's also a section of the drive called the parity. And parity information is a section that's stored it's stored across 2 drives. And what happens is if any one drive fails, you can take another drive that's just like the first 2 and plug it in, and it will actually recreate the 3rd drive from the parity information. And so RAID 5 is all about hardware resilience. So now you can and they have hot swappable drives and racks, and you'll see people pull that old drive that went bad out and plug a new one. I did it just a couple of weeks ago. Had one that was dead, took the dead one out, plugged the new one in, boom, it rebuilt, and everybody's happy. So hardware is fine.
Yeah, but there's a limit to the fidelity of the backup. In other words, an amount of drives can die at once. Otherwise you're not going to be able to rebuild the array.
You're right, and I will tell you from using a lot of commercial drives that sometimes the number of cycles they last is really closely related. It's kind of scary, but you'll see one fail, and then a week later the next one fails. But unless 2 drives failed at once, your RAID 5 is pretty resilient to that kind of stuff. RAID 6 then, Russ is sort of introducing these things, I think. RAID 6 is where you say, well, I'm worried about that. So RAID 6, at least 3 drives again, but now any 2 drives can fail. So the parity information is actually maintained on each drive, and that means that you could lose 2 of them at once, and you can still rebuild those 2 drives from the other single drive that remains. It takes a while, but it'll rebuild. And the problem with RAID 5 and RAID 6 is that you say I bought 3 1-terabyte drives. You do not have 3 terabytes of space. You can look that up online if you want, but RAID will format out to a much reduced amount of space for that. And RAID 6, it's even further reduced. So RAID 5, you're going to lose something, and like with the 3 terabytes, you're probably going to get something like 1.4 terabytes. RAID 6, you may get 1 terabyte out of those 3 terabyte drives, and it starts, that's the space you're sacrificing for the parity information into the RAID. So that's pretty severe.
Yep, I agree.
You ever use RAID 6?
No, RAID 5 only.
I use RAID 6 a lot. I build like big drive arrays, and I actually have used RAID 6 on quite a few of them. I've used, how about this one? I had one once that had 2 partitions set up in RAID 5. So the partitions were mirrored, and they were one way. So one side pushes all the information out to the other side, and all that was RAID 5 backup. So now even if you hack the production part of it, the backup that you can't get to is still sitting back there in the background, being maintained as a mirror. It was not RAID 1 though. It was just being mirrored. I mirrored it with rsync. Cool. So in any of these situations, again, you need to decide what you need, and you need to understand those pieces. And that's why this gets so scary, because most people don't understand what you're understanding right now about RAID and cloud and out of band. And you need to remember those 3 things, like that there's 3 different pieces here. One is hardware that you need to be protected from. One is malware that you need to be protected from. And the other one is just, how do I get my data back? Where does it come from when I need to restore it, and what condition is it in? So has it been corrupted on there? There's something called an SLA, which is a service level agreement, that if you go to a cloud provider, they will explain to you, or, well, they won't. They'll give you 50 pages of legalese, and your lawyer can explain it to you. But, I mean, at the end of the day on that, what it means is that the service level agreement is essentially what they're doing. So you need to understand, as you deal with cloud, as you deal with RAID, as you deal with all these things, how are you going to be impacted by those things? What's going to happen to you at the end of the day?
Right.
Any other comments about that, Russ?
No, I think that's spot on. You know, and again, not just one and done. You know, use a combination of these methods and continue you know, protecting your data, because I mean, what else do you have? You need the data, you need the backups.
Yeah, I mean, I put an example in the show notes of it was based on a real world case. I actually wrote it. It's actually published. It's called the Jing'an Telescope Factory, and which was based on a real company that's not a telescope factory, that I did a response case in China once, and it was about just this kind of thing where they had backups, but the backups were corrupted by malware. And the malware then was backed up onto the backups, and that was it. That was all they had. And when they went to restore, they had a very nice restore method. They copied all the backups back onto the original production server, and guess what? All the malware was there. It ran again, and it wiped everything out, and they had no way to recover all this stuff. And I wrote a case about it, so if anybody's interested in the case, let me know. I've got a citation for it or something like that. On the next show, then, Russ and I are going to talk about some different providers of cloud backup. We'll talk about some different things, and I'm going to pull down some of their SLAs and see what they say about what that goes on. If you have something you want us to look at, let me know, and I'll look at that one too. I'll probably look at the ones that I'm more familiar with. But if you tune in next time, we're going to talk just about that and how you can make sure that those funky pictures of Aunt May don't get lost. Okay, so see you then.
Take care. Bye.